Live, this is Lunchtime Agenda.
Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Agenda. I'm Laura Jays. Well, it's been a tough couple of days for the Prime Minister. He's been the subject of ridicule and accused of being out of touch. Today, Tony Abbott dusted himself off for a media conference but said he stands by his decision to knight Prince Philip but has learnt some perhaps harsh lessons.
The decision is made. It was made for good reasons and I stand by it, but obviously there are some lessons in these things, and the lesson that I learn is that there does need to be wider consultation about these sorts of awards in the future.
The question of judgment has also extended to the PM's Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin, with Conservative commentators, including Rupert Murdoch, calling for her to be sacked. This was Christopher Pyne's response.
I support the Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin. I don't think there's any prospect of his suggestion being pursued by the government. Peter Credlin and Tony Abbott have played a remarkable role in getting the coalition into government after just 2 terms. We couldn't have done it without Peter Credlin.
Joining me now from Canberra is Liberal MP Dan Tehan. Dan Tehan, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pretty tough couple of days for the government. You and the backbench must be pretty frustrated that the government has been the subject of such ridicule because of a PM decision.
Look, good afternoon, Laura. The thing that we've got to do as a government, I think, is stop talking about ourselves and talk about the issues which are important to the nation. We've got a big agenda coming up this year. Obviously, we've got another budget. There's the intergenerational report. There's the review into workplace relations, tax reform. These are all on the table, as well as trying to get our higher education reforms through. And these are the things that we need to be talking about as a government.
But this is a distraction that can't be denied at the moment. It's coming from within and without. There's calls for Peter Credlin to step down today. In your opinion and in your experience, has the communication out of the PM's office always been as good as it could be?
Oh, look, the Prime Minister said today that obviously we need to make sure as a government, and he as a Prime Minister, we're consulting with the community. I think also we've got to make sure that we're addressing the issues which are really important to the Australian people. I think the debate over the last couple of days has been a distraction, so the best thing we can all do is get on and talk about the matters that really impact on people's lives. And I think if we can do that as a government and show that we are listening to the community, then it's onwards and upwards for us.
We will get on to those issues, but has the Prime Minister called you, and what advice did you give him?
Look, I think the Prime Minister has been calling most of the backbench and he's been listening to the backbench, he's been taking that advice, and I think the fact that he's come out today and made it very clear that he's has learned a lesson through this process, that he needs to make sure that he consults. I think that's a positive thing, and I think that as long as the lessons have been learned, as I said, I think the government has a lot on its plate. There's a lot to do to make sure that the nation continues to grow, that we continue the processes of making sure that when we hand over our nation to future generations, that it's going to be in a better place, and that's what we need to focus on.
Okay, on some of those issues, and in your capacity as chair as the Joint Intelligence Committee, tomorrow the government, both sides of politics, in fact, in this committee will hear or conduct public hearings into the metadata legislation. After the Paris and Sydney attacks, are you noting a new willingness to pass these laws? Is there still some reservations about the incursion of privacy, and how quickly do you want to see these passed?
Well, obviously, the committee will begin hearings again tomorrow and the next day. Then, obviously, we will have to sit down and consider all the evidence that we've heard, as well as go through, the hundreds of submissions that we have received. The great thing about this Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence and Security Matters is that it's bipartisan. There has been strong bipartisan will to make sure that we get the laws right, but also that we do get them passed. And I think that's important, and maybe we could learn from the work that this committee has done in other areas, because I think where there is a will to get things through the Parliament and the Labor Party is prepared to play its part, we can get things done. So look, we'll have to wait and see what the evidence is we hear over the next 2 days, but this is very important work that we're doing. This is the sort of the fourth major piece of legislation in the national security field that the government has brought before the Parliament. The other three have gone through with unanimous support, and let's hope from...
Dan Tehan, sit tight for a moment. We are just going to cross quickly to the Queensland Premier Campbell Newman.
Continue working hard together to achieve great things. Now, the world has changed in recent years. It's a far more challenging and demanding world that we face. Falling demand for our resources, less revenue from Canberra, greater risks to our security. But it's Queensland and Queenslanders that I feel that have proven to be the most resilient. We've been resilient because we've had stable and strong government in this state that's been working very, very hard to a plan that's working. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to reflect very quickly, but importantly for a few moments, on what we have learned so far in this election. We've learned that Labor cannot fund Queensland's future. We've learned that Labor has got absolutely no plan to build the infrastructure, the schools, the hospitals, the roads and bridges that our local mayors, the businesses, the chambers of commerce, the communities say are desperately needed. We've also learned that the minor parties are doing preference deals. They're swapping the votes, and that would deliver a hung parliament that would hang Queensland. This is clearly, undoubtedly, a recipe for economic chaos, and it would sadly hurt Queenslanders. Now, in contrast, we've learned some things about this side of politics. We've learned that the LNP is the only team that has a plan to create 209,000 new jobs. The only team that can fund Queensland's future, and the only strong and stable team that can deliver on that plan. Now today, I want to focus on our strong plans. What we'll do to keep ensuring that Queensland remains the best place for Queenslanders and their families to live, to work and to raise a family. Now I am proud, said it before, I'm proud of the progress our team has made for Queenslanders over the past few years. We're creating over 1,100 new jobs every month. We're reducing the cost of living. We're actually employing more nurses and doctors. Our early years literacy and numeracy results for our kids at schools are the best they've ever been, meaning our children are better placed to secure the jobs of tomorrow. We're investing in better and safer roads and working hard to tackle traffic congestion. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, in just 3 years, we've significantly cut break-ins, car theft and robberies. But we're not complacent. No, not at all. I stress today particularly, and I'll say it a few times today, the job is not yet done. So let's talk about the journey we've been on so far. I take you back to the 24th of March 2012 when Queenslanders went to the polls. They were after change. The state was in a complete and utter financial and economic mess after 20 years of Labor's waste and mismanagement. Labor left us without a whole range of things. We had pipes without dams, dams without pipes, trains without seats, and our doctors and nurses weren't getting paid, but fake Tahitian princes were. Because of Labor, the cost of living was getting out of control. Electricity prices had gone up 60% in just 5 years. It cost an extra $7,000 in tax to buy your family home. Car rego costs were the highest in the country and public transport fares were doubling. Now, when we were elected and finally given a real look at the books, we learned, I might just stop for a sec, remember that day, Tim? Remember that day? We learnt, and then very quickly other Queenslanders learnt, every other Queenslander learnt, that things were far worse than we'd ever feared.
Campbell Newman there, the Queensland Premier. You can continue watching that on Channel 648, Australia's public affairs channel. Joining me still is the Liberal MP Dan Tehan. We're discussing metadata. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Dan, is over the holiday break when we saw that attack in Paris, it was revealed that these terrorists were communicating via email and using spam addresses, spam subject lines to communicate. Now, metadata laws in this country would not have picked that up. So do we need to look at going further in this legislation?
No, I don't think we need to look at going further in this legislation, but I think what we do have to make sure is that we learn from the types of communication that the terrorists are using, and then we can see whether we need to, down the track, put other measures in place to try and deal with these things. Obviously, they're getting more sophisticated with the technology that they use. It's one of the reasons why we've given our intelligence agencies an extra $600 million so we can make sure that they've got the technology that they need to be able to deal with these matters. But I think what we have to do first of all is deal with the matter in hand, which is this metadata legislation that we're facing.
We also saw Matthew Gardner, the former NT president of the Labor Party, gone to fight with our allies against ISIS, but he could still be charged under Australia's new terror laws. Is that fair? Are you comfortable with that?
Well, it's very hard to talk about a specific case because I'm not quite sure exactly what he is doing or what he might not be doing. But I think that the key point and the key message that's come from the government is that you should not go into these areas or into these regions and fight. It's illegal to go into some regions and fight. That was the Foreign Fighters Bill. That's the legislation we brought in last year which made that illegal. But also you can be kidnapped and also that this is a war zone that you are going into, and you are placing yourself in immense danger, and the likelihood is that you could end up losing your life. So the key message and the take-out message here is do not go into these areas.
Well, there's around 400 Australians reportedly either fighting with IS or supporting IS or Daesh at the moment. The Immigration Minister, Peter Dutton, has said that we need to have a conversation, perhaps consider revoking their citizenship. Can we do that? The UK has.
Yes, look, the UK had some special exemptions when these laws were put in place. Now, I think one of the things that the community, and this is feedback that I've had from my community, that they find strange is that these people can go overseas and fight and we cannot make them stateless. And they do want to know the reason why, because they say, well, the simplest thing would be not to let them back. So I think Peter Dutton's got every right to raise that as a community concern, but I think these issues need to be considered. We need to look at all the detail. We need to look at what is the laws in place in the UK and make sure in a methodical way that we examine, OK, is there anything more we can do here in Australia? At the moment, the view seems to be, no, there isn't. But if the community is saying why is the case, I think we at least need to explain that to them. And
just one final question, Dan Tehan. Are we winning the battle of hearts and minds if 400 Australians are supporting IS or over there fighting with them? Doesn't the government need to do more on the ground in our communities?
Well, the Attorney-General yesterday didn't put those numbers on the amount of foreign fighters or those assisting them. He saw it more around potentially up to 90 over there, and there might be all up 200 who are either fighting or supporting. But whatever the number, what we do have to do is make sure we're doing everything we can, and we have to make sure here on the ground we are winning the hearts and minds, as you put it. And I think, you know, one of the things that once again as a government we need to do is work with all communities, including the Muslim community, to make sure that especially young people, and they're the ones that are really concerning us, that they aren't getting caught up in this and getting trapped in the dream of going over there for some sort of martyrdom, which, you know, just won't exist for them.
Liberal MP Dan Tehan, thanks so much for your time on Lunchtime Agenda today.
A pleasure, Laura.
Changing